This is Dream Power Radio, the place where your dreams turn into reality. Here is your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman.
Hello, and welcome to Dream Power Radio. I'm your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman, the Dream Coach. This is a show where we talk about dreams, both daytime and nighttime dreams, and how you can use them to make the internal shift to a life you love and rediscover the truth of who you really are. In most of the programs I've done about dreams, I've talked about the dreams that individual people have. I want to expand on this a bit and put the focus today on the many dreams that people have that affect not only themselves, but their families as well. These include dreams that people have about other family members, as well as dreams that family members have that are similar to one another. We're going to talk about all this with my guest, award-winning clinical psychologist, Edward Bynum, who works with individuals and families. Edward is the author of numerous books, including The Dreamlife of Families and Our African Unconscious. Welcome to Dream Power Radio, Edward.
Oh, good to be here. I'm excited.
It's a wonderful, fascinating subject. But Edward, I want to start off this conversation with a quote that's in your book from dream expert Montague Ullman, who said, quote, "When we dream, we tap into information from some kind of informational black hole. But sometimes we get into that black hole deeper than we thought and touch on something or someone else." Do you believe this is an apt description of family dreams?
I believe it's an apt description of family dreaming on many occasions. Not all of our dreams are about our families. About 20% of our dreams, however, do have some aspect of a family member in them. And not all of our dreams about family members are, by definition, psychic or paranormal or anomalous. But a significant enough percentage are to indicate that periodically we go so deep into our own individual unconscious that we, in an unusual sort of way, touch upon the actual unconscious of someone else that we have an intimate relationship with. And that's why I've developed this notion of a familial or a family unconscious. That is that numinous, energetic system, that fabric of relationships that intertwines all of us together. And it's not only a physically based one, but it's also a psychically based one and a psychologically based one, and brings together all of our cognitive functions also. So yes, we are primarily individuals, but periodically we enter into a larger web.
Okay, and one of these, what we would call family dreams, is something that's called crisis telepathy dream.
Yes.
That's where we hear family members in trouble in our dreams. So can you elaborate on these type of dreams?
Yeah, crisis telepathy is a very specific kind of dream. Most of the time when we're dreaming, we are supposedly, quote, unconscious, i.e. sleeping, not aware of what we're doing physically. And that we have a drama, a narrative that plays itself out. Those are most of our dreams. And again, roughly 20% of those involve our family members. However, there's a particular kind of dream referred to in the clinical literature as a crisis telepathy dream, in which we have access in ways that are not totally clear to the intimate information going on with somebody that we have a close relationship with. And we call it crisis telepathy because it's defined by certain particular behavioral and cognitive parameters. One, we already have a prior relationship with someone. So that's why it's a family web or a family connectedness or family shared experiences, which we refer to as family unconscious. Two, something happens dramatically to the person, to one of our family members, usually a close to death experience, a very frightening one, such that they're very agitated at that moment. And they, quote, send out, unquote, a pattern or a message or information into that system. And the third part is that the person who, quote, receives the information, unquote, is often in a very quiet state, either sleeping, dreaming, resting, or something like that. That particular pattern categorizes that crisis telepathy situation. So it happens not like normal anomalous behavior telepathy, but rather in a specific life-threatening situation, a crisis, and it is well documented in the literature. It's been well known in the literature for close to a century. It's just that we don't know quite how to explain it. And so we tend to ignore things that we can't explain.
It happens a lot where we just ignore things like this.
We just ignore it because we don't have any traditional energetic informational systems way to explain it. But phenomenologically, it happens. And it's happened to millions of people.
And do these dreams usually or almost always involve death of some?
They usually involve either death or the threat of death. It's a very heightened situation. And there are times and other kinds of dreams, and not necessarily called crisis telepathy, but they're very similar, in which somebody's actually leaving this life and they're dying. And as they are leaving this life and they're moving through their experience at the end of life, they will very often be perceived by someone in their family who is very remote physically from them. And they don't know that, clockwise that they're dying at this time, but they all of a sudden have a profound intuition, or there's sometimes a direct communication. And again, we don't understand that quite either, but it happens. It's similar to the phenomenon of what's referred to as a NDE, or near-death experience. Near-death experiences happen to thousands of people every day on the planet, in the United States and on the earth. It is well documented what the phenomena is, but we don't have an explanation for it. And so you still have people this late in the game, this late in the new age, this new modern era, denying people's experience that is replicated thousands and thousands and thousands of times. So that's part of the arrogance of our science today. Someone has this experience and we say, well, chemicals in your brain, and they refuse to acknowledge that there is direct information very often communicated here. So again, the world is much bigger and wider than our theories are about the world.
Mm-hmm. And how would these kind of dreams differ from what we call visitation dreams?
Well, that is a kind of visitation dream. That is a kind of visitation dream. Visitation dreams are, by the way, more common or commonly recognized in certain groups in the world than others. In other words, people who are more psychologically, culturally open to that are much more likely to actually perceive or remember or allow themselves to remember situations like that. You find many people in the African American tradition, certainly in people in South America, people in India are much more open to that this occurs, whereas oftentimes that phenomena is actively denied or repressed in the United States and Europe. Not all, but there are cultural influences on memory. We know this is true. We know memory it's affected by anxiety and repression and so forth. And if you're more open to it, you're more likely to see it. It's a little bit like the old and replicated dozens of times sheep's, goats, ESP studies. They get people who don't believe in all this ESP stuff, and the people who are much more open to it. Maybe. And then they give them a random test about ESP. The people who are open to it statistically score higher on objective tests about it than those who don't. So there's something that we don't quite understand going on here about our openness, our psychological boundaries, and so forth. And our psychological boundaries, they're not hard and fast and physical. They are not, and it's the same with consciousness. We're conscious in the womb before we're physically born. We don't all of a sudden become born and then become conscious. No, for some period of time, we were conscious before we were born. And from near-death experiences, clinically replicated, or I should say, observed thousands of times, we are, quote, dead, cognitively, unquote, for some period of time after physical death. So the beginning of life and the end of embodied physical life are not exactly identical to the clinical measures of that.
I know very often when people are dying, They're visited by other family members. And anecdotally, I was with my mother when she was dying, and she saw her father. And what was interesting to me was that she saw him. She was a child because she called him by the name she called him as a child.
Yes.
And what I found is it brought her a lot of comfort. And I told her afterward, because she was a person who never remembered her dreams and never talked about anything like this. And I told her about this, and it really did give her a lot of peace.
Well, yes, and it can give people a lot of peace, one, and also two, very importantly, it is an observed phenomenon by professionals, by individuals and families and so forth. So it happens too often and too frequently for it to be a coincidence. There's something going on here about our state of consciousness, the dreams that occur within that consciousness, and information. And we have to be open to that, because we're not the end all of what we are going to know in science. Our science is continuing to expand. Our science is continually expanding in terms of information, in terms of the boundaries of our technology and our consciousness. And we need to be open to that. And dreams are one of the ways in which we are intimately involved in that phenomenon.
Right. But even, put science aside for a second, people have been dreaming since we've been humans. And you've studied the history of
Yes.
What did the ancient people know that we don't now, or we've forgotten?
Well, from my understanding and my research, what ancient peoples knew that we have either forgotten or repressed is that consciousness is not a physical phenomenon. We live in an age in which we unfortunately commonly assume that consciousness is an epiphenomenon, is a biochemical effervescence in some sort of way of our neural structures and our neuroscape. And it certainly is intimately involved in our neurological functions. Neuroscience has demonstrated that unequivocally. But we tend to reduce all of that to our physical brain. And we therefore forget that, one, our physical brain is not the same as our consciousness. And two, even if you did, well, underneath our physical brain, there is also levels of energy, quantum mechanical energy. And quantum mechanics has demonstrated that matter itself, and presumably our brains are made out of matter, on some level, are trans-temporal and trans-spatial. They go beyond the limits of traditional temporal time and beyond the reach of conventional physicality. They vibrate out. So for those who are listening who say, well, no, it's all a matter of the brain, then I would say, fine. Then take it to its logical conclusion. What are the levels of energy beneath the physical brain? They're quantum mechanical in nature. And if they're quantum mechanical in nature, which is a hard science, then the very stuff, the neuromelanin and other functions of our brain are ultimately trans-temporal and trans-spatial, and boundaries are created and imposed by us, not the other way around.
Well, this is all fascinating. We have to take a short break now. We are speaking about family dreams with psychologist Edward Bynum, and we'll be right back. What do Thomas Jefferson, Elias Howe, and Paul McCartney have in common? They all understood the value of dreams, and as a result, the ideas, inventions, and creations from their dreams affect us to this day. What great ideas are you leaving on your pillow at night? Sign up for a complimentary consultation at my website, thedreamcoach.net, and discover why your dreams are a terrible thing to waste.
Welcome back to Dream Power Radio with your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman.
Yes, welcome back to Dream Power Radio. I'm your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman, and we're talking about family dreams with Edward Bynum. Well, Edward, but you spoke earlier about quantum mechanics and how, it's all about the idea of connectivity. And
Yes.
One place where connectivity is demonstrated is in the idea of dreams that family members have that are similar to each other. So
Yes.
expand on this a bit and explain how this happened to.
Well, if you stop and reflect on it for a little bit, What group of people do you know that you often have been living with for decades, eating food with for decades, going to sleep with for decades, have the same sleeping patterns, and also have important, intense emotional and cognitive relationships with? There are family members, for better or for worse. They're family members. And so that creates a kind of web or system or informational field, if you want to think of it that way, that has a certain degree of cohesion and extension through usually what we think of as space and time. That is a family unconscious field. Certain parallel or coordinating tendencies arise in that. We're constantly talking about someone in the family reminds us of somebody else in the family, or someone in the family reminds us of someone we knew in our family earlier. You remind me of my grandmother, blah, 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 or something. There are just lots of parallels, including sometimes in names and so on. It's not that because it's not random, totally. People choose, but there are coordinating tendencies that occur. And so those coordinating tendencies contribute to the similar content and dynamic processes of our dreams. You know, you're in a family event, either a wedding or a funeral, a birth or something, and there are many different family members involved in that. Well, we all share the same experience. We experience it differently, but we're all aware of this new birth that's coming to the family. So it's like we all have a slightly different point of view over the same phenomenon, kind of like a hologram. But from that fragment of a hologram, you can reconstruct the entire hologram. Well, to use that analogy, we're different. Each one of us is a slightly different angle in that hologram, but from that, we can reconstruct and find what everybody in that hologram, so to speak, is viewing. So it's an analogy, but that's the basic sense of a coordinated informational and energetic field that influences behavior, including clinical behavior.
So when people in families have similar dreams, does it usually revolve around a crisis situation?
No, most of the time it's not. All of you may have a different take on the wedding, what happened, it reminds you of this, and so on and so forth. And you all have different kinds of dreams. That's not a tragic event. And you just all happen to be dreaming that you went to Cape Cod and you spent the weekend, sunny weekend, and you had a great time. And Bob and whomever were married that time, and it was a signal event that summer. So most of the time it is not, but occasionally it is. And when those happen, those are usually either crisis telepathy, which is very specific, like we were talking about earlier, or a visitation dream, and sometimes what's called a prodromal dream. And what a prodromal dream is, when we have a feeling or an image or a combination of those in our dreams that foretells of our own physical illness in some sort of way, which shouldn't be so surprising since our unconscious is in touch with our somatic physical self and our psychological self. So that's not so unusual, but a prodromal dream. The illness shows up in a dream before it's actually recognized clinically by the person.
Mm-hmm. If they take advantage of that knowledge, they're hopefully. Are family type dreams more common in functional or dysfunctional families?
Generally, they're a little bit more noticeable in families that are more functional. Why? Because there's more communication. There's more reference to our dreams. There's more openness to the intimacy of revealing the dream culture in a family. Families that are not as functional tend to be more emotionally distant and scattered and antagonistic. And that is not the conveyor belt, the culture, the soil in which shared memories are cultivated.
Can family members who do have similar dreams use that to their benefit to improve their family situation?
Absolutely. One of the areas that I'm very interested in, and this is, of course, the work for the future, is that I'm very aware, because I've done a lot of family therapy, that literally family members can make other family members sick. Yes, you make me sick actually, there's some energy behind that. The stress, the tension, the projection of blame, all those sort of family dynamics can make a person physically ill, wear down their somatic resistance.
So, Edward, one of the other aspects of dreaming is the ability to actually learn about ourselves and learn about illnesses we may be having.
Yes, there's a phenomenon that's noted in the clinical literature referred to as prodromal dreams. And what that is that a person has a dream that is usually their own dream about themselves, and that they are developing a physical illness, either directly or symbolically. And the dream literally foretells the somatic, later medical illness that evolves. And so they're referred to as prodromal dreams. And in some situations, these are much more rare now, much more rare, a person actually dreams that someone else that they have an intimate connection with is actually developing an illness. And those are more difficult to ascertain, to predict, because they are outside of your physical and traditional psychic self. But as long as it's within your own intrapsychic, individual unconscious, you have access to that information, that deep unconscious information, because your unconscious touches both the part of your body that is not known to you and the parts of your mind that are not known to you. But your unconscious processes both. And it has to, by definition. By definition, we cannot be conscious all the time of everything. We can't be. There are too many bodily functions going on. And there are too many mental cognitive functions going on. And we can only be conscious of a certain limited subset of that. But our unconscious mind is aware of all of that and processing it all the time. And those prodromal dreams.
One of the fascinating things that when I was reading your book, that I really thought was fascinating was about the dreams that occur during pregnancy.
Yeah.
And you say that dreams of pregnant women actually change during the course of a pregnancy. So can you elaborate on all this?
Yes, there's several really good books out. One by Patricia Maybrook and another woman who collated the dreams of women going through the different trimesters of pregnancy. And depending on the trimester, the content of the dreaming that she had about something going on in her own body, of course, influenced the content of her dreaming. At some stages, she was dreaming about mounds of the earth and things getting wider and so on and so forth. Then at another trimester, she's dreaming about little furry things coming into her life and so on and so forth. And then at the end, she's dreaming about big waves of water and things spilling out and so forth. So, and there are lots of parallels like that in both of these studies. So I included those in the Dreamlife of Families because it's fascinating. Also, the content of the partner's dreams also change depending on the trimester of it. And particularly the partner who's not having the child, who may be associated more with, quote, bringing in the family income, unquote, in traditional families, they often dream more about increasing responsibility and the heaviness of things placed upon their shoulders during the latter months. So both of them change. The ones who's having the dream, however, they were more dramatic because it reflects the biological and somatic and biochemical things that are going on inside of a woman's body. And so how can the whole hormonal changes, how can that not affect your neuroscape, your mind? And it's going on there for 7 to 9 months. And so there it is. Yes.
Yeah. And
it's fascinating. It's very interesting.
It is. And you also say that pregnant women have dreams that are more intense.
Yes. Well, yes, because of the pregnancy begins to affect the hormonal cycle. And as it affects the hormonal cycles, your dreams become more vivid, more intense, because your body is adapting to this monumental, gigantic change that's going on inside of your own self. And if this is your first birth in particular, nothing like this has ever happened to you before. I mean, you may have had your menstrual cycle, okay, and that may have been this or that. But a pregnancy is a whole other magnificent, terrifying, awesome event to occur that changes the landscape of the world for you. So it's pretty difficult for that not to affect the most intimate part of your mental life, your dreaming life.
Mm-hmm. I would think so. And also probably helps a pregnant woman become more comfortable with what's going on in her life.
Most of the time, not all the time. Depending on the life circumstances, it can be also one more thing to add to the chaos.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to, let's not be too Pollyannish about it. Sometimes it's heavy.
Oh, that's true. I mean, life does happen.
Life happens. And sometimes we just happen to be in the way while it's happening.
Mm-hmm. Well, the dreams in your book came from something called the Family Dreams Research Project. So can you tell me what that was?
Yes. A number of years ago, several decades ago, actually, at this point, I had become interested in dreams. And I had noticed in my clinical practice that sometimes people in the families who were doing therapy would report similar dreams. And I thought, wow, I've never heard of that before. And so I asked them to humor me, and a number of families write down their dreams, but not share them with each other. You know, just humor your shrink a little bit because he's collecting some research. So just write down your dreams. And I collected them. And I collected hundreds of these. And out of these, I began to notice a certain percentage showed coordinated content in the dreaming. Now, they were going through a major family event. Somebody in the family had been hospitalized. They were going through family therapy, which is pretty intense. And so things are heightened. And so this was not the general situation. And so I was able to take advantage of that and turn that into a family research project. And then I began to collect that on a wider scale through magazines and other places. So that after a while, I thought a treasure trove of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of family dreams. And out of that, I did an analysis of which ones fell in which categories. A lot of times, most of the times, actually, they were not coordinated. They weren't. They were regular dreams about a family member. Great. 20% of us generally do. But sometimes they were strikingly close and even had the same events occurring on the same dates and so on and so forth. Based on the waking state of events, of course, but also sometimes there was no similar at that time waking state event. They were thinking about something in common. They were going through a crisis, and sometimes they were together, sometimes they weren't. And that's where I was able to collect a lot of crisis telepathy dreams and also a lot of dreams, visitation dreams, as you described earlier. And so that became the basis of the Family Dreams Research Project. And out of that, I was able to collect enough to formulate that certain recurrent transactional patterns, if you want to think about it that way. And I included them in the Dreamlife of Families.
Mm-hmm. Well, very fascinating. Edward, how can people find out more about you and your work?
I would love it if people would pick up a copy, obviously, of the Dreamlife of Families, but they can also go directly to my website, which is www.obelisk Foundation, like an Egyptian obelisk, www.obeliskfoundation.com, like an obelisk, obeliskfoundation.com, and it will show that. But you can pick up the book on Amazon, many bookstores. It's easily gotten, simple paperback. And it's written to be read and understood and to be enjoyed.
Well, Edward, thank you so much for being on Dream Power Radio today.
Well, I very much enjoyed this, and I appreciate the opportunity to reach so many people. And we all share this in common.
Well, we've been speaking about family dreams with psychologist Edward Bynum. I hope you've enjoyed today's program. If you have, please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our future episodes. Until next time, this is Debbie Spector-Weissman saying, sweet dreams, everybody.
You've been listening to Dream Power Radio with your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman. For more information on Debbie or to sign up for her newsletter, go to dreampowerradio.com. This has been Dream Power Radio.